What are your expectations and how can we dive just below that?
Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories. Welcome back to So Here's My Story. I'm Jody.
I'm Elliot.
And in just a minute, Elliot tells a story that we get right into, like these cracks and crevices in the customer experience where you can accidentally lose someone and how not to. So before we jump into Elliot telling that story, just a quick reminder, if you have not picked up our bonus episode that was, yes, it was about the used panty industry. You may have heard that. It's an industry. It is. It's fascinating. You can get that at shmsbonus.com or just by simply texting the word story to 345-345. Here we go.
So here's my story. A friend of mine bought a Lincoln Navigator. And as you know, or as you may know, a Lincoln Navigator is a big animal.
It's an enormous vehicle.
It's an enormous vehicle. And those things aren't cheap.
No.
And I can't pretend, because as you know, we do so much advanced preparation for every single story that unfortunately I fell down on the job. I didn't research the prices of Lincoln Navigators, but I think we can just
fairly say it's a lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
And he had to order it. They didn't have the one that that he wanted on the lot. So he waited a couple weeks for the Lincoln Navigator to get there. The dealership called him and said, "Hey, it's in. Come take delivery of your car." And
brand new, custom ordered
Lincoln Navigator. As a large family, is really looking forward to this. And when you go in for a purchase like this, yes, you're laying out a lot of money, but it's also kind of exciting. You get your new car, you get that new car smell, it's an exciting thing for you. And it's kind of a happy day because you already made the decision on the money. So it's a happy day.
Yes.
You've waited, you take delivery of it. So he drives off the lot. And the first thing that he notices after he gets his mirrors adjusted and his seat adjusted and he gets behind the wheel, gets comfortable and he puts it in drive, he notices that the gas has a quarter tank in it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow. So I was making mental notes of where this story might go. I'm like, oh, I wonder if it's this. I wonder if it's this. I didn't see that one coming.
Yeah. He only had a quarter tank of gas. And so he actually was a little irritated by this, but he figured, okay. So he asked the guys at the dealership, he said, "Hey, look, it's not a big deal."
Oh, that's it. So he actually went and asked them about it.
He asked them about it. He said, "It's not a big deal, but I just noticed a quarter tank and I just assumed that it would be a full tank. Do you guys have some place that I can top off?" And they said, "No, it's our policy. We give a quarter tank, so that you can drive and you can get to a gas station that you regularly use, or you can get home or whatever. But that's what we give you. We give you a quarter tank."
Oh, hold on. Okay, back up. So it's not even like we forgot or
no.
Or like we have a policy of whatever it is what it is, but we don't even pay attention to it. They've decided that we're going to give you enough to get somewhere else. And in a Lincoln Navigator, because I started, oh my goodness.
That's about 50
oh
feet.
My goodness. Exactly. So A, you can't get very far on a quarter tank of gas in a Lincoln Navigator. 2, so your very first experience of having this brand new car, which, by the way, while you were telling the story, I quickly Googled, they start in the 70s for 2019.
Oh, do they? Okay.
Yeah. So this is not a small amount of money. No. Your very first experience is stopping and filling up that monstrous gas tank, which is probably
laying out a little more money,
more, not a small, at least, if not more.
And yet, so your first experience before you're even off the lot, now this is me projecting, although I'm fairly sure it's the same thing. Your first experience before even driving off the lot is one of disappointment and some anger.
Well, yeah, or just, it's so interesting. Like, would I be furious? Of course not. Lives don't hang in the balance, but it feels like such a horribly missed opportunity.
Yeah. And in thinking about it, if he had looked down and seen a full tank, it's not like he would have said, "This is the best dealership ever."
Absolutely. Absolutely.
He would have glanced down. If it had been me, I would have glanced down. I would have seen the full tank and I would have gone, "Yeah, of course, it's a full tank." I was just making sure.
Right.
Just confirming that it's a full tank.
I'm not even sure you'd even notice that's the whole, what an interesting, okay, I love this story because there's 10 things here. It is. It's one of those things where I could see somebody saying like, look, we're not going to impress anybody by filling up the tank.
No.
You know, like you're not going to be like, wow, those ghost guys are amazing. They really went above and beyond by filling up the tank.
Right.
But what you have to acknowledge, whether you like it or not, is that if you don't do that thing, then all of a sudden you've created an opportunity to be a disappointment. It's like, you know, some I hear lots of companies say like, how can we exceed expectations? It's almost like making that choice is how can we disappoint someone's.
What are your expectations and how can we dive just below that?
How can we actually draw your attention to us like, you know, not cutting corners, but just, I don't know. It just sounds like
you're falling short. I think that's exactly right.
It's not even falling short. It is saying a thing. What it's saying, there is a message being conveyed is that we care about you until shortly after you get off our lot. Like we're gonna get you out of our little sphere here, and then you're on your own, which is different than like we got you. Like we've thought about your experience of the day. We want to. It does say something.
See, it said, and this is why it's so important because the message that it conveys can be filled in. The narrative can be filled in by whoever because my take on it would be, as a policy, our company is going to squeeze every single dollar from you that we possibly can. And so that means that they're not going to be considerate of me. If I take it back for service, they are going to squeeze every single dollar from me and not give me any consideration whatsoever. And even though I may know I'm bringing this animal back for service, it's going to be a big bill. I like to think that if there's something, and I've had this done, you know, it sounds kind of stupid, but you know, the electronic key fob so you can unlock it.
Yeah.
And so I've had somebody notice, oh, the battery was low, so we just replaced the battery, but we just throw that in.
Sure.
That little thing, I like that they notice, and I like that they're not going to nickel and dime me. How much could that battery cost? It can't cost much.
Right.
But I would have been irritated if they said, and you'll notice this $2.89 charge, that's for the battery and the key fob. I would have been really ticked off.
Yeah. No, it's just these small little things. It's interesting because if I swing over into the business owners, if I bring a little compassion to my thought process for a second, let's give them the benefit of the doubt for a second and say they were really struggling with money, that you know, the profit margins were down, who knows, whatever, that they were really struggling and they were looking for places to cut expenses. And somebody was like, we spend so much on gas. Does anybody even notice that we fill up the tank and gas prices are up and these things are huge? That's hundreds of dollars and no one even notices. I could see that being the case, but it feels like there's so many other places you could cut expenses that wouldn't necessarily be so evident to someone in this ripe moment of like, dun, 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 it's my new car day. Like I'm in such a good mood and wait, you got me a quarter of a tank, you know, or here's the funny thing. Even if they put 3/4 of a tank in, like didn't fill it up. So they were saving themselves a quarter of a tank. I would look down. It's not like my expectation is a full tank. Like if I looked down and there was 3/4 of a tank, it wouldn't grab my attention. Half a tank might not even grab my attention. Quarter of a tank grabs my attention. It feels like it's like verging towards.
See, now a quarter of a tank, I think is just a slap in the face, but I would have looked at 3/4 of a tank and I would have thought, I wouldn't have been ticked, but I might have thought that they meant to deliver a full tank, but they didn't have attention to detail, which to me would be upsetting.
See, I don't even give it that much thought necessarily. Like I don't even know if it's ever occurred to me, do gas stations, do dealerships even have gas on site? I don't know. Like I don't even think about it that specifically. In fact, had I looked down in a quarter tank, I might not have even noticed, and I certainly wouldn't have gone back and asked. But because he went, and that's why I was like, he went back and asked.
He did go back and ask.
So the fact that he went back and asked, and that it was actually a choice, I find fascinating. Like I leave a lot of space for, hey, just didn't think about it. Like that probably happens all the time. And I certainly in my business, there have been times where someone assumes that I have done something with great conscious deliberation. I'm like, nope, just didn't really think that through all the way. But
but you know, they could have, let's go back to your illustration of the dealership. They're struggling for money and this is a huge expenditure because they've got, 500 cars and letting 150 of these things go a month or whatever they're doing. Although if they're getting that many, they're not struggling for money. But anyway, but yeah, it does add up and it becomes a line item. However, if you're buying a Lincoln Navigator that's $70,000, there are many, many places the dealer could hide that extra $100 where you would never, ever notice. Yep. And it kind of brings me back to certain things that have been prevalent in my industry. When I started the firm back in 2002, there were a couple of things on the bills that I would never do. I would never charge for photocopies.
Right.
Because people are, lawyers are not cheap generally. They're paying a lot of money. And then to see this bill that you don't want to get, you generally don't have insurance for, it's a business expense, and you haven't necessarily set aside money on your budget for these legal fees if something blows up or you need it. And then to see at the bottom of the bill that, there's another $1.50 here for photocopies, or back in the day,
I was going to say $1 a page for fax.
Yes, $1 a page for fax. And I would never do that. And it kind of reminds me of, I had a law partner at one point, and I might have told this story at some point earlier, but he was with a client all day and he was coming back late. He hadn't eaten all day because he was at this meeting, and he stopped at Burger King and he picked up lunch and he put that on the bill. And so I saw this $4 charge on the draft bill, and I said, "What is this?" He says, "Well, it's lunch. I went to Burger King." I said, "You can't charge the client. We're not charging the client $4 and whatever it was for lunch." He says, "It could have been a lot worse. I could have gotten a bigger lunch." I said, "So not the point. They're not going to look at this and go, wow.
But I didn't get fries."
Correct. They're not going to look at this and go, wow, Wagenheim Law was really saving us money by going to Burger King.
They're going to be like, they're charging me for your Burger King?
Yeah, they're charging me for your Burger King.
Exactly right. But that brings up a whole other level of what's so interesting is the message that you're sending. I mean, my gosh, this happens in all sorts of communication kinds of things where one person is making a sacrifice in their eyes. Like this guy, maybe he was like, I could have gotten a $35 lunch.
For ribs.
And I was starving and I just got one tiny hamburger and a water, whatever. Yes. It was only $3 or $4. But then by putting it on the bill, you draw attention to something and you create this opportunity for somebody to be displeased when you were actually going out of your way to do the opposite. And so, I mean, who knows? Maybe this dealership is like, hey, you should be happy we put any gas in there. The car came with no gas.
We could have made you push it off the lot. Like you went downhill.
But I think that's it. It's like the what we're talking about here is like this weighted balance of, is it worth it? Like if you're going to make that sacrifice and only get the $4 Burger King, like maybe you just don't put it on there. At all versus the value of what thing you're drawing attention to with the choices you make in your client and customer relationships.
Yeah. And I generally look at it this way, that there are two documents that are guaranteed to be read by your customers, your clients. One is your agreement, your engagement agreement, and one is your bill. It's not really your marketing material.
And actually, I would go so far as to say the first one isn't always even read.
It's not, right.
But they will always reach it.
But you're always going to read, okay, so there's probably one document, it's fair to say, that's going to be scrutinized. And it's not your marketing brochure, your website, or whatever. It's your bill.
Yeah.
And so there are certain things on a bill, little things, and it may not make a difference. But for me, on a bill, I will not have telephone conference with client. I'll have telephone conference with Bob, and because people like seeing their name, talk to Bob about X, Y, and Z, as opposed to the canned descriptions, because it seems more in keeping with the relationship that we have. That's
so interesting, because I will give you a complete counter to that, but because it's a different business and a different kind of thing. When I work, and it depends on the situation. If I have a client where I am exclusively working with the owner, then I may just put their name or something and that's it. Right. When I'm working with any other mosaic of people, and I always run this by them, I say, I ask or especially if it's like a larger company where there is a billing department. Yeah. I explicitly ask, what kind of detail do you want in there? Because sometimes they want the detail. I'm not just going to send them. I feel weird. I used to try and guess, and now I just ask them, because I would feel weird sending this completely obscure sort of like 8 hours with no description of like why or what, or like this month with not even a description of hours with just an amount. However, a lot of times the conversations that I'm having even the fact that I had a conversation, let's not even get into what it was about. I certainly would never put that detail on there. But, whether my hours were with Bob or Susan or Kevin or Marie is sometimes in and of itself a confidential kind of thing. And it's not billings, or sometimes I'm working with someone who's a little bit of a, I won't say like a problem, but somebody who's having some issues. Well, it's not accounting's business that I spent 10 hours with that person. And that's private. It's no one's business. And so I asked them, what they want on there, because sometimes the care that we're talking about here, the care that I am extending, the thoughtfulness that I'm extending to that client relationship, sometimes it looks like detail. Sometimes it looks like lack of detail.
But the important thing that you said was that you ask them, you have that conversation. And I remember that I had a client very early on when I did have my bills, say telephone conference with Susan, point to, here's the amount of time, point to whatever. And she called up and she said, I'd really appreciate it if you would put detail on there. What did we talk about? What was this? Oh, wow. And so I learned that, and I would have that conversation with clients, but there was a situation, and it was not too long ago. I had a longstanding client, and they said, I want to know, I want to see you on the bill just to refresh my recollection. Oh yeah, we did consult about that. So I put on the bill, this is just a couple months ago, telephone conference with, let's say, Bob regarding Carol's severance. Okay. Well, what I didn't realize, because he had told me to put the detail on the bill, is that, well, I knew at the time of our conversation he hadn't fired Carol. He was just thinking about firing Carol, but I didn't know that Carol was the one that gets the bills.
No. Yeah. Are you serious?
No, this is absolutely true.
Oh,
and so Carol walked into Bob's office and said,
I'm laughing, but this is not funny.
No. Do we have to have a conversation because this was on Elliot's bill, and are you letting me go?
Wow.
Yeah. Now, there's a whole other episode on the way Bob handled it, because literally what he did was he said, I'd love to talk to you about this, but I really got to go. And he bolted. No,
he didn't.
Yes, he did.
Oh, my God.
He bolted. And I was like, you can't.
We need to do a how not to handle things.
Yes. We could dissect this entire episode.
Wow.
But I found out about that, and he called and he said, hey, I'm not upset at you because you did exactly what I asked you to do. You put detail on there, but I'm just telling you now we have a situation.
Oh my goodness.
And so
you must have felt terrible.
Oh, horrible.
Oh my
horrible.
Goodness.
But so, there are a lot of layers to it. And now, it's only been, that was a couple months ago, but now I'm like, yeah, if it's an HR issue, particularly for a current employee, then I'm not going to put the detail on there, and I'll explain to the client. But yeah.
But there's an important thing here. We started off this story talking about like disappointment in things, and you wouldn't say to a car purchaser, like, how much gas do you want in your car? The asking part doesn't work there. So there is a certain amount of obligation, or obligation is not even the right word. I just think of business smarts about anticipating what people will care about and what they won't care about.
And what they'll notice.
And what they'll notice, and what they'll care about that they don't actually care about unless you don't do the thing. However, I do think as an entrepreneur, we really miss opportunities to just simply ask. And I got some fantastic advice early in my entrepreneurial career from someone who said, and it had to do with writing proposals. They said, if you're struggling this much with how to structure it or what they need, she said, then you haven't asked enough questions. You have more questions for them. If you don't know clearly, if you're not on the same page with them about exactly what they want, what they care about. And I keep that as like a little trigger for me of, if I'm having trouble wrapping my head around how to tell them or how to structure it or whatever, I just ask. And what's really been helpful is I even flat out say, like, is there, if it's an organization, I now know that sometimes they would prefer me to do one, if it's more of like a project, one giant thing, because they only want to have to go ask once. And they're like, put anything and everything in you. And then even add like another, I had somebody say like, just add another like 10,000 to that. It was a multi-year project, just in case we need it later, and will give us a little buffer. I'd rather have it be way too much and not use it all. And because I only want to have to go ask the board for this once. Versus other times somebody has said to me like, look, I know once we get this started, it's going to have momentum all of its own, and we can do everything we want to do, but getting an initial yes is going to be impossible. It's the tiniest thing we can start with that will have some value to it. So people will see, but it's really, really small. Just knowing that, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so easy to cut and shape something to make it work for somebody. But you don't know if you don't just simply, it's almost like we did an episode on just say that. It's like, just ask that. What do you care about?
It is, because I think that the due diligence that is most important in each of these, and even in the story that I started out with, is figuring out what the pain points are for the people who are important to you, whether it's the people who are engaging you or have to go to the board, or the people who are driving the Navigator off the lot. What are the likely pain points? And yeah, for your situation, you have a relationship and you can call and you can ask. For the car dealer, maybe they could have done a survey or resorted to a focus group of customers that they have a rapport with, and they could have asked. But just making the decision, as I imagine they did, where you started out in your response, which was, well, it's a lot of money. So, we can save money here, but making that in the isolation of a boardroom and then just coming out with it and hoping that your customers are cool with it is a problem.
Well, I think everything we're talking about here is just simply putting yourself in the customer experience path, because your experience the day you go to buy the car, a different mindset, a different embodiment than the day you go pick it up if you ordered it. Now, sometimes those things are all in the same day, but certainly if I think through all those different ways that the different points at which you interact with a car dealership in the process. There are some days that have like high angst. There are some days that whatever, if you're taking it off the lot the exact same day you just went through buying it, you might actually be in kind of a mental blur and not even notice the gas. But I have to assume that if that is all behind you and you're just coming to pick up your car, that is a day that is just ripe with like, dun, 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 like this just feels fantastic. If you put yourself in that position and then say like, okay, how can we make sure that it continues to feel that way, then that whole gas thing should kind of show up in there. Now, it doesn't mean you have to like fill the car with snacks and, flowers. I mean, you don't have to do that, but just looking for opportunities where something that's an easy win that then you could foil it with a somewhat small kind of thing, is really important. But that customer experience is so interesting. I know we've talked about this before because I had read that Harvard Review article about mapping out the places where somebody might be anxious in your process, or because I remember you mentioning that there is this like discovery phase where you guys are doing tons of stuff, but you're not really interacting with the client as much. Right. And they might be sitting there thinking like, hey, nothing's happening.
Right. And then they get this huge bill for a lot of time.
Yes. And so like that opportunity to get in front of that and say like, even just to say like, hey, for the next month, we're not going to talk a lot, but there's going to be a ton going on. If you have we'll check in with you and then check in with them, and noticing, being aware of, and then tending to that client experience is an opportunity. We talk a lot about sales and marketing and business and whatnot, and the ability to like before you get out there into impressing new people, you have somebody right there in front of you, and whether or not you make them want to come back or not is huge. I mean, when I think about that, your original story, would I come back to a dealership because they gave me a full tank of gas? No. I mean, I'm not going to be like, wow, they filled up my tank with gas, I'm coming back. We can break it down into two things. Would I not come back because it had a quarter tank? Me, Jody Hume, but I probably wouldn't have noticed. But hearing this story, like if I was the person who went and asked and they said, oh, no, we made a conscious decision to just give you enough to like basically make it to the first gas station you can get to, I would hear that. And I would say like, these are people who aren't like, think they're not going out of their way to please me.
No, but here's a way that you could do it. Let's assume, just for the sake of discussion, that a tank of gas for this thing cost $100. It probably costs less, but let's assume $100. You have a quarter tank of gas. And if you said to them, when they got in, say, hey, it came with the quarter tank, but here's a coupon for the gas station down the street for $40.
Yep.
Now you're saving money, but it's an extra. When you have a bill that's coming there, but you put the line item, instead of not charging people for things and they don't realize that you haven't charged for it, you put the line item and then you put no charge. Yes. There's a way to highlight the things where it's in front of people that you're looking out for them and you're trying to do things. Yes. And here it was just a subtraction, and that's the problem.
That is the problem, because it's funny. That's really funny. I had the exact same thought while you were talking before you said it, though, that you could save money by not putting X, wherever the car is, it is, but have a rule that if it's below a half a tank of gas, you hand them this $40, $50 gas card coupon thingy. That way, you're not putting $150 worth of gas in it, but you have taken care of that experience and made them feel good. Those opportunities just to make somebody feel thought about, I think are just huge.
Right. And missing it, you miss out on the next $70,000 sale. So that's our story.
But the discussion doesn't have to end here.
No, it does not.
In fact, we don't want it to.
No, we don't.
That is why we actually have our private Facebook group,
which we started to make sure that we could get your comments, your rants, your thoughts,
your stories.
You
can find links to that group as well as show notes and links to subscribe via email and how to find us just about anywhere you can possibly find podcasts at sohere'smystory.com.
And you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at SHMS Podcast.
And since we know it takes a village.
Yes, it does.
We'd like to thank our village, our super talented, incredibly patient team.
And occasionally snarky team.
Yeah, but in the best of ways.
In the best of ways.
Snarky.
Yes.
Good mockery.
So a huge shout out to the people who actually help us produce our show. First, our sound engineer, Tom Hansen.
Thanks to Christy Schmier for our brilliant show notes and all the other fantastic writing she does for us.
And to Taylor Mathauer for doing just a little bit of everything.
Including wrangling us. Which is no small feat.
No, it's not.
This is Jody Hume.
And I'm Elliot Wagenheim.
And you've been listening to So Here's My Story.